Khorne here, and today I will be sharing with you how I would rank each race currently present in Warhammer 3 based on how strong they are on the campaign map from my own experience playing this game for more than 3000 hours on legendary difficulty. Now, there are 24 races in the game currently, and I have to admit I don't play every one of these all that often. But I do have a general idea of how strong they are and where they belong. Now, even though I have ranked them all individually, I've also categorized them in 3 different groups, in which these factions are fairly similar in strength. The first 6 that stand above the rest and can be considered overpowered, then from numbers 7 to 13, which I think are fairly middle of the road and don't stand out too much. And then there are numbers 14 to 24, where, well, it is just a race to the bottom to see who is the worst. So without further ado, claiming the #1 spot to absolutely no one's surprise, Khorne. I mean, what do I even need to explain here? You spawn armies out of thin air, you fight endless battles, and you can end the campaign by turn 8. There is just nothing that can ever even come close to matching the sheer destructive power that Scarbrand possesses. Now, it is true that this isn't an easy campaign to play, because you do have to manage your blood host properly without going bankrupt, and you make no income from your settlements, so in order to do well, you have to continually be fighting battles. But luckily for you, you get all of the tools you need to do just that. The second strongest race was rather difficult to determine, or rather numbers 2 to 4 were extremely difficult for me to say which is stronger. But I ended up going with the Vampire Counts. The Vampire Counts play a lot similar how they used to play in Warhammer 2, where you would just use hordes of trash infantry to hold the line, while just a few elite units won you the battle. And honestly, this playstyle was just enhanced in Warhammer 3, even though they tried to do the exact opposite and get rid of it. While skeletons got gutted, zombies got a bit more love than they should have. And I'm not talking about them getting too many buffs, as if you don't have Helm and Ghost, they're still mostly the same as they were in Warhammer 2. However, they are dirt cheap, they have less balance of power than skellies, you can recruit them in every settlement and instantly raise them from the dead in every province. They can survive for longer because of the increases to healing cap, and the changes to healing in Warhammer 3, where it is now percentage based, helps them out a lot because they have a lot of health. Combine all of this with the fact that the Vampire Count's economy is now more early game focused, so what ends up happening is that you start your campaign on a high note and just never slow down. Which is ironic cause, well, zombies. You also never have to waste your income on recruitment buildings or slow down to recruit units, as by just expanding and fighting battles, you'll be able to recruit any unit in your roster. The third strongest race, I would have to say, are the Warriors of Chaos. So similar to the Vampire Counts, the Warriors of Chaos also have the campaign philosophy of never slowing down. You can recruit units instantly anywhere on the map, and you never have to replace them, as you will just be able to convert them into higher tier units over time. Similar to Khorne, they thrive from fighting many battles, so to do well with them you really have to be extremely aggressive. The Green Tide is probably not what people expected to be number 4. And the reasoning why they are is how well they synergize with Warhammer 3. Because of the lower supply lines, they can field more armies. Their best units are goblins, which synergize with this even more with them being cheaper to maintain. They have a much stronger economy than they should, slamming CA into the book for that one. And they make a ludicrous amount of income from fighting battles. So cheap armies with strong economy and a really high post-battle loot income just makes them snowball extremely well in their campaign. So much in fact that I think that Skarsnik, who takes this even further with 40% upkeep cost reduction for Gobbos, might actually be the second strongest faction in the game. Hellforging the way to number 5 is the Chaos Dwarves. Unlike the previous 4 races, the Chaos Dwarves are very late game focused. Their early game is by no means weak though, but you can have difficulties fighting certain factions because of the lack of access to good units. Where the Chaos Dwarves truly start to shine is when you gain full access to the Tower of Tsar, research a good portion of your technologies, and when you finally start getting some good units. From then on, the Chaos Dwarves become nigh unstoppable, as they just compile so many bonuses and army abilities on top of one another, it can become ridiculous at times. Buying out the number 6 spot is the High Elves. And I don't know if people expected them to be higher or not, but in my view, even though they are still extremely powerful, it takes a lot longer for them to get going than it used to. And even though they are much richer than any of the previous 5 races, I just don't believe they can reach the same sort of strength level as them as quickly. Now these 6 races I consider to be in a league of their own, the cream of the crop if you will, and from numbers 7 to 14 I consider to be races that are mediocre in strength, with them being similar to the strongest races, only doing a worse job at it. So raiding their way to number 7 is Norska, and mostly because of similar reasons as the Greenskins, where they have a much stronger economy than they should, and they get a lot of post-battle loot income. But their units are not quite as strong, and they are more expensive. Not to mention they have a much harder time dealing with difficult situations. Similar to the Warriors of Chaos though, they can get a lot of unique bonuses through resource buildings, which can make their units extremely powerful later on in their campaigns. Defending the number 8 spot is Kislev, and I think I might be being too generous, or maybe not generous enough, but Kislev campaigns are, from what I found, rather easy if not enjoyable. They have good units that can rise to the occasion and perform much better than you would expect. Similar to Norska and Warriors of Chaos, they get bonuses with each resource building they have, so their campaign can snowball. And for being an Order faction, they actually have quite a decent post-battle loot income. If you are also starting in Kislev, you can confederate the other Kislevites fairly quickly and have a strong start to your campaign. So good armies, a strong start, and a good economy, I would have to say they are decently strong. Caravanning their way to number 9, we have Grand Cathay. And this is mostly because of how dirt cheap everything is for them. They have a lot of cheap armies which perform much better than they should. So by spamming out many armies you can do well in your campaign. Their buildings are cheap as well. And they all start out with some of the strongest lords in the game, which just makes their campaign a lot easier. Stinking up number 10 is the Beastman. Now, this is a bit of a blow for me, but after thinking about it, I think it fits. Races that have army limits got the short end of the stick when it comes to Warhammer 3, as where other races can now spam out armies and win battles by sheer overwhelming numbers, the Beastmen are stuck in a limbo of few armies and no good units for a big portion of your campaign. Luckily, they have decently strong mechanics, with them being able to ambush, not having to stay in one place, and having strong bonuses with their Hearthstone buildings to bail them out of difficult situations and being lower rated. Enslaving number 11 is the Dark Elves. And I think I might again be way too generous here, but whenever I look at them, they do have a lot of different tools at their disposal when it comes to dealing with difficult situations. While they are wealthy, and like the High Elves can increase their wealth infinitely, they have some difficulties dealing with enemies in the early stages of a campaign, constant public order issues to contend with, not to mention the lack of strong early game economy and very expensive units. They mostly come online in the later stages of a campaign, but where the Chaos Dwarves would dominate by this point, the Dark Elves will still struggle. Seducing number 12 is Slaanesh. And I honestly would have preferred to put them much lower, but despite their insatiable debauchery, they are still decently strong. They have a terrible economy, expensive units, low replenishment, a terrible technology tree, but despite all of this, they have decently strong armies and can summon free armies on top of that, which can help them out of sticky situations, every pun intended. They do get a decent amount of post-battle loot income, but they don't have the ability to fight all that many battles to truly make use of it. And if you want to seduce enemy units, most of that will end up being spent to win battles. Then, designed by the Horned Rat himself, at number 13, we have the Skaven. Honestly, I would have preferred to put them much higher, but I think they take way too long to get going. Even if you're spamming out armies of clan rats, you simply get too little food now. Your economy is terrible, and the AI being as skittish as it is, you will be fighting a lot less battles in Warhammer 3, especially compared to Warhammer 2. Overall, I think it takes them too long to get going, and I don't think they deserve a higher spot because of that. And from this point on, it is races I consider to be on the weaker side, either because they were designed that way, or because they need a bit of an overhaul or update to help them out. Galloping at number 14 is Britannia. and for a multitude of reasons. They have a decently strong economy, cheap and effective units with peasant archers, decently strong cavalry as well, and very powerful lords. They do start out fairly slow, but after they get some Grail WoW units, they can start conquering at a decent pace. Honestly, if I was making this while they had free knights available to them, they would have been amongst the top 6 races. Growing their forests at the number 15 spot are the Wood Elves. And I might be putting them too high here. They aren't really a race that falls in line with the others, as they don't do much in terms of conquering the map. Instead, they just sit in their settlements and press the enter. I'm not saying you can't or shouldn't explore the map, but by judging them on how quickly they can conquer or how strong their empire can become, they would actually rank much lower than this. So by playing the campaign the way it is designed and not expanding away from your forest too much, they can be pretty good. But the best comparison I can give you is with the Warriors of Chaos, who have richer, more defendable settlements with better armies and a campaign designed for exploration. While the Wood Elves are just a budget version of that, confined to their little corner of the map. Slithering their way at number 16 is the Lizardmen. And I'm mostly putting them here because of how strong their armies can be. Much stronger than most factions in this game. While their economy is really bad and their post-battle loot income is even worse, top all of that off with very expensive units and the lack of any meaningful mechanics to help you in your campaigns, it just makes them a bit weak and a bland race to play in my opinion. Grumbling at number 17 is the Dawi. Now this will probably earn me a spot in the book, but to be honest, they don't really deserve a higher spot. They have a worse economy than even the lizards because of the way they were implemented in Warhammer 3. They have to pay more to build up their income buildings to get less income than other races, while also having to build up an additional tier to get the same amount of income as the other races. I honestly have no idea why so little thought was put into their campaign. And before I again read the argument that they have high income from their settlement buildings, just keep in mind Khorne settlement buildings make more income. Their early game armies can be fairly weak, and it takes longer for them to get going in comparison to the other late game focused races, while also not being all that great even in the later stages of a campaign. Overall, they just aren't in an amazing spot right now. Plundering their way to number 18 is the Vampire Coast. And honestly, I was probably being too generous here. They have really expensive units for a terrible economy, really weak armies as their armies are mostly glass cannons, which are fairly short range, so you're constantly going to have to be replacing your units. Horrible empire building, and overall just an unenjoyable campaign. I would have put them lower, but they do have some very useful mechanics with raising the dead and shipbuilding, which can give you a bit of an edge in your campaigns. At number 19, summoning the Elector Counts, we have the Empire. Honestly, there isn't much to say here. They are just a faction that does everything, but they can't do anything right. They have weak armies, which aren't cheap, a mediocre economy, although better than that of the Dawi, and the later the campaign goes, you don't really get much stronger than when you started out, especially when being compared to the other races. Awakening at number 20 are the Tomb Kings. Sad, I know. Setcher is already preparing his endless legions to march at me, but I see no other option where to put them. They are in comparison to the other races extremely slow because of their army limits, and it just takes too long for them to get going. They did get a lot of love with their update in Warhammer 3, and a few new tools to use as well, but they are still incredibly weak and slow to get going. Number 21 is being eaten by the ogres, and this is because their campaigns are honestly very horrible. Maybe I am overreacting by putting them this low, but honestly their economy is abysmally bad in the early campaign. While everything from units to buildings is incredibly expensive. Camps are as well difficult to defend and build up. Their empire building is terrible, and while they can get extremely rich over the course of a campaign, the problem is getting there and not rage quitting along the way. The 22nd spot is being teleported away by Tzeentch. And maybe this is personal preference, but Tzeentch just feels bad to play. They have the same problems as Slaanesh, but without the free armies and much worse units. Now maybe I don't know how to use them, but the changing of the ways, in my opinion, don't have a big impact on your campaign. They are all rather useful and can help you in a lot of different situations, but they aren't as game-changing as is summoning armies out of thin air. Ultimately, your limited income and mediocre armies is what brings Tzeentch down so much. Embarrassing himself at number 23 is Daniel the Demon Prince. Honestly, what is there to say about him? He has access to an extensive unit roster with the lords and heroes from across all of the Demons of Chaos. But his economy is mediocre, the way he recruits units is terrible as well as extremely limited. He himself is a mediocre legendary lord, and even though he gets a lot of useful tools to use, they mostly just feel jumbled in there without any rhyme or reason, which ultimately makes his campaign feel quite weak. And finally, something you all saw coming at the last spot, bristling with plagues, we have Nurgle, the worst implemented Chaos God in the game. He has extremely expensive units, which he recruits in a terrible way, grows very slowly, can't recruit units at full health, can't expand quickly because he can't defend his settlements nor field many armies, mediocre economy with overpriced settlement buildings, units that are extremely vulnerable to missiles, and a completely worthless mechanic with the Plague Cauldron. And worst of all, a campaign experience that, unless you own the Champions of Chaos DLC, will give you PTSD. Well, this is how I would rank every single race in the game. I would like to hear your thoughts, whether you agree or disagree with my assessments. So do let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe for future content. Thank you all for watching, and until next time.
Khorne fights as one.